Hello, students, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really interesting and important part of biology. We'll be looking at the tissues that basically hold our entire body together. So let's get started with our explainer on connective tissues. Have you ever really stopped to think what gives your body its shape? Or how does the oxygen you breathe in manage to get all the way down to your toes? And what exactly is holding your bones and your muscles together? Well, the answer to all of these questions is what we are going to study today. It all comes down to one very special group of tissues. So, here is our plan for today. First, we will get a clear idea of what connective tissue actually is. Then we will explore some of its different types. We'll start with blood, then bone and cartilage, ligaments and tendons, and finally, the tissues that pack our organs and store fat. Okay, let's begin with our first section. To really understand this topic, the clue is right there in the name, connective. What does it mean to connect something? Well, just as the name suggests, the main job of these tissues is to connect and also to support all the other tissues and organs in our body. So what is the formal definition? Let's look at it carefully. It is a group of tissues that gives our body its form and provides support. But I want you to pay very close attention to this last part. The cells are loosely spaced and they are embedded in something called a matrix. This idea, the cells in a matrix, is the single most important feature that all connective tissues share. Please remember this. Okay, so what is this matrix we are talking about? Well, the matrix is simply the non-living substance that is found between the cells. Think of it as the ground substance. Now, the nature of this matrix is super important because it decides the function of the tissue. For instance, if the matrix is fluid, well, the tissue can flow, right? Like blood. But if the matrix is rigid and hard, the tissue will be strong and solid, like our bones. All right, let's move on to our first example. And it might be one that surprises you a little bit. We are going to talk about blood. Now, I know what many of you are probably thinking. Ma'am, how can blood, a liquid, be a tissue? That is a very common question, and it's a very good one. So why is blood a connective tissue? The answer is actually quite simple. It's because blood fits our main definition perfectly. Remember what that was? It has to have cells, and those cells have to be in a matrix. Well, blood has cells, doesn't it? Things like red blood cells and white blood cells. And it has a fluid matrix, which we call plasma. The cells are just floating around in this plasma. And of course, it connects our entire body by moving important things around. Now, have a look at this picture. This shows us exactly what we were just talking about. You can see all the different types of cells here. The red ones are the red blood cells. You can see different kinds of white blood cells and also these little bits called platelets. And see how they are all just floating around? They are suspended in that fluid matrix, the plasma. So let's break this down and look at the job of each component. First, we have the plasma. This is the fluid matrix, and its job is to carry things like food, hormones, and waste materials. Then you have the red blood cells, or RBCs. Their main job, a very important one, is to transport oxygen. Next up are the white blood cells, the WBCs. You can think of these as the soldiers of your body. They're there to fight infections and keep you healthy. And finally, we have platelets. These are tiny cell fragments that rush to the scene when you get a cut and help your blood to clot. Okay, so we've talked about a fluid connective tissue. Now, let's move on to the solid framework of our body, the parts that give us our shape and our structure. We're going to talk about bone and cartilage. Now, bone and cartilage both give us support, but they are very, very different from each other. Bone, as we all know, is very strong and not at all flexible. Why? Because its matrix is very hard, made of salts of calcium and phosphorus. Cartilage, on the other hand, is flexible. It also has a solid matrix, but it is made of proteins and sugars, which makes it much softer and less rigid than bone. Here is a really simple way to feel the difference for yourself. Go on, try it. You can gently fold the cartilage of your ear, right? It bends easily. That is because it is cartilage. Now, try bending the bone in your arm. Of course, we cannot do that. It is completely hard and rigid. That is bone. And this is what they look like up close under a microscope. On the left, you can see compact bone. Look closely. Do you see how the cells are arranged in these very dense, tight circles? This is what gives bone its amazing strength. Now, look at the image on the right. That is cartilage. See the difference? The cells are much more widely spaced out, and they are sitting in that smooth matrix. This structure is what allows it to be flexible. All right, next up, we have the tough connectors. These are the tissues that literally hold our skeleton and muscles together. And we are going to look at two very important ones, ligaments and tendons. Now, please pay close attention here. This is a point where many students get confused, so we will go through it very slowly. Let's start with ligaments. Ligaments connect one bone to another bone. Let me repeat that for you. Ligaments connect bone to bone. They are also very elastic, which lets our joints move. Okay, now tendons. Tendons connect muscle to bone. Let's say that again together. Tendons connect muscle to bone. They are incredibly strong, but they have very limited flexibility compared to ligaments. Okay, we are on to our final group. Let's look at the tissues that act as packing material and also store energy for us. These are areolar and adipose tissue. First up is areolar tissue. The easiest way to think about this is to imagine it is the body's packing material. You know, like bubble wrap or thermocol that you find in a package. It keeps everything safe and in its place. Areolar tissue does the same thing inside our body. It is found between the skin and muscles and around our internal organs where it fills spaces and supports them. And next we have adipose tissue. You probably know this better as fat. This is our body's fat-storing tissue. If you look at the cells, you can see they're filled with these big fat globules. Now, adipose tissue has two very important jobs. First, it stores fat as a reserve of energy. And second, it acts as an insulator, like a warm blanket under our skin that helps to keep our body warm. So that was a lot to cover today, was it not? Let's just do a quick summary of this amazing family of tissues. We saw blood for fluid transport. We have bone for rigid support, cartilage for flexible support, ligaments connecting bone to bone, and tendons connecting muscle to bone. Then there was areolar tissue for packing and support, and finally adipose tissue for storing fat and for insulation. It is amazing how different they all are, yet they all belong to the same family. So, after looking at all of these different types, from a liquid like blood to a hard solid like bone, let me ask you a final question to think about. What is the one single thing that all of these very different tissues have in common? The answer goes right back to the beginning. It is their basic structure. They all have cells that are loosely arranged and embedded in an intercellular matrix. And that brings us to the end of our lesson on connective tissues. I hope everything is much clearer for you now. In our next class, we will continue our journey into the tissues of the body, and we will be looking at the ones that create movement and send messages. That is, muscular and nervous tissues. Thank you, and see you next time.